"You'll carry my child by spring," the mountain man declared to the obese widow he'd just saved. Winter Haven, 1891. Night fell like a lid over the mining town, and the snow in the street turned from gray to iron. On the Ashford porch, a grand house with its lamps burning bright and its heart gone dark, a young widow knelt in her threadbare mourning dress while the door slammed shut on her breath. Clara Ashford, 25, soft-bodied and shivering, gathered the small sack of clothes they'd thrown at her feet as if it were the last warm thing left in the world. "Please," she had said to the lady of the house, "please don't turn me out." The only answer was a sneer and a command to bolt the lock. Neighbors lingered like crows. A woman's whisper cut the cold. "Look at her! Can't even carry her own weight." A man chuckled into his scarf. Ashfords finally came to their senses. Clara rose on numb legs and stepped off the porch. The town watched, grateful the cruelty wasn't pointed at them. She walked without knowing where, past the lit windows of the hotel where no one would sell her a room, past the feed store with its Christmas wreath frosted stiff, past the church whose bell had tolled for her husband 3 weeks ago and hadn't made a sound for her since. The wind worked its way through her dress until her shoulders shook. One misstep, one stumble, and the snow might close over her like a door. She turned into the alley by the livery to hide her tears and met the wall instead. Her breath came short and sharp. She pressed a palm to the boards to steady herself and felt the truth run through her. If she didn't find a roof before midnight, Winter Haven would finish what grief had started. "Keep moving," a voice muttered from somewhere. "Don't stop, girl, or you'll freeze where you stand." It wasn't kindness. It was advice for a stranger he didn't want to bury come morning. She tried. The world tilted. The sack slipped. A blackness swam up. Bootsteps broke the hush. One set, heavy, unhurried, the kind that never lost an argument with a trail. A shadow detached from the corner where frost rhymed the barrel stacks. He was too tall for the doorway he stepped through, shoulders a cut of granite, coat hung with clean snow, beard wind-rough, eyes winter blue and steady. Isaiah Stonewall, known on the freight road as Ike, had come down from the range for salt, quinine, and a coil of new rope. He found a woman instead. He took in the sack, the raw red of her hands, the way pride kept her from falling even as the cold pulled at her. The crowd's whispering thinned. He shrugged out of his coat and wrapped it around her without asking permission, the way a man closes a window in a storm. "On your feet," he said, voice low as a banked fire. "You don't die in this street tonight." Clara blinked up, startled by the certainty in a stranger's tone. "Why do you care?" "Because no one else does," he answered, and the town's lamp seemed to lean away from him. He lifted her sack in one hand, offered the other to her, and nodded toward the dark beyond Winter Haven, where pines stood like sentries and the wind carried a cleaner cold. By the time dawn touched the frozen hills, Clara Ashford had left behind everything she'd ever known. Her husband's house, her name whispered in pity, even the illusion that the town she had served for years would ever defend her. She rode behind Isaiah Stonewall on his horse, her cheek resting against the coarse wool of his coat, too cold and too shocked to think. The hooves drummed over packed snow, the breath of the animal rising like smoke. When they finally stopped at a clearing near the river, Isaiah dismounted and lifted her down easily, as though she weighed nothing at all. He set her near a small fire he built with practiced speed, his movements sure, his silence heavier than the cold. Clara watched him from across the flames. He was older, maybe mid-40s, with lines carved deep by wind and years. His eyes, pale blue, unreadable, never lingered long enough to seem unkind, but never looked away long enough to be safe. "Eat," he said, handing her a tin cup of broth. She took it in both hands, the heat biting her palms. "Why did you help me?" He didn't look up from the fire. "I've seen enough people freeze." "Are you a trapper?" He nodded once. "Mountain man, cabins north, 2 days' ride." Her heart thudded. 2 days? I should find work in town. I have to earn my keep somehow. Isaiah's gaze lifted at last, steady and final. "No one in that town will hire you, widow. They already buried you beside your husband." The words struck harder than any winter wind. Clara looked away, blinking fast. She knew he was right. Since Thomas's death, every door had closed. The mine foreman had turned his back. The pastor's wife had offered only prayer, and her mother-in-law had made sure every whisper in Winter Haven ended with the same sentence. She was always a burden. Isaiah poured more broth into his own cup. "You got any family?" "None left," she whispered. "My parents died years ago. Thomas was all I had." He grunted softly, the sound more acknowledgment than comfort. "Then you need a roof before the snow deepens. You come with me, you'll have one." Clara's fingers tightened around the cup. "Why me? You don't even know who I am." "I know what I saw," he said. "A woman thrown out like trash. And I don't stomach that kind of thing." His words should have soothed her, but they only unsettled her more. There was something dangerous about the steadiness in him, the certainty of a man who never asked permission, who'd long ago stopped explaining himself. When the fire died to embers, Isaiah stood. "We ride again when the sun breaks." Clara hesitated. "You're taking me to your home." He met her eyes across the dark. "Ain't much of a home, just walls, roof, and fire, but it keeps a person alive." She swallowed hard. "And what do you expect of me there?" He didn't answer right away. The pause stretched until the crackle of fire filled the silence. Then he said quietly, "I'll tell you when we get there. Best you decide then if you can live with it." They rode again at sunrise. Snow fell light and steady, whispering against the pines. Clara's hands clutched at the saddle as they climbed higher into the wilderness, leaving the thin line of smoke from Winter Haven behind. By midday, her limbs ached and her thoughts drifted to Thomas, to the gentle man who had married her despite the gossip, who had promised her that kindness could outlast cruelty. He'd died crushed beneath the earth he dug for others, leaving her nothing but debt and a widow's name spat like an insult. She wiped her eyes before Isaiah could see. "You cryin'?" he asked without turning. "No," she lied. "Good," he said simply. "Cryin' wastes heat." That night, when they camped again beneath a bluff of frozen rock, Clara gathered the courage to speak. "Mr. Stonewall—" "Ike," he corrected. "Everyone calls me Ike." "Ike, when we reach your cabin, will you send me back down once I've rested?" He stared into the flames. "Depends." "On what?" "On whether you're willing to stay." "Stay?" He looked at her then, not cruelly, but as if weighing her worth the way a man might measure a storm's strength. "I don't live easy. I don't keep company. But a man gets tired of burying winters alone." Her breath caught. "Are you asking me to—" "I'm telling you plain," he interrupted. You'll have food, warmth, and a name that keeps men off your back. But you'll have to work for it." She stared at him, heart pounding, unsure whether to be frightened or grateful. Ike took off his hat and ran a hand through his wind-stiff hair. "Think on it before we reach the ridge. The mountain doesn't care about promises made out of fear." The fire snapped between them, bright and merciless. Clara wrapped her shawl tighter, feeling both rescued and trapped, saved from death only to face a choice she didn't yet understand. And somewhere behind the walls of his silence, Isaiah Stonewall was thinking the same thing. What am I doing bringing another heart into a place that's already buried one? By the next morning, the snow had hardened into a white crust that cracked beneath the horses' hooves. The mountain loomed higher, the air sharper, the silence absolute. Isaiah rode ahead, his figure cut against the rising sun, broad-shouldered, steady, carved from the same iron as the ridges themselves. Clara followed close, wrapped in his coat, her breath visible in thin wisps of silver. The road to his cabin was not a road at all, only a trail that wound through fallen pines and cliffs glazed with ice. Every step forward was a battle against cold, exhaustion, and fear. At midday, they stopped by a half-frozen stream. Isaiah watered the horse, then handed Clara a piece of dried meat. "Eat. We've still got half a day's climb." She took it, but could barely chew. Her jaw trembled too much. "You'll get used to it," he said, his tone not unkind. "I don't think I will," she whispered. "I've never been this far from town before." "Town's nothing but walls to keep people small," Isaiah replied. "Up here you see what you really are." She managed a small, sad smile. "And what am I then?" He looked at her for a long moment. "We'll find out." As they continued upward, the world narrowed into white silence. Clara's hands had gone numb, her legs heavy, when Isaiah suddenly raised his arm. "Stop," he said quietly. She froze. "What is it?" "Cougar tracks," he murmured. He swung down from his horse, studying the prints in the snow. "Fresh. Big one." Fear ran through her like a chill wind. "Will it attack us?" "Not if I kill it first." Before she could protest, he lifted his rifle and moved toward the trees. The forest swallowed him in seconds. The silence that followed was worse than the cold, so complete it felt alive. Clara stood by the horse, trembling, clutching the reins. The minutes stretched until they became unbearable. She whispered a prayer, the first in years. Then came the gunshot. She gasped, heart pounding. A moment later, Isaiah emerged, calm as if he'd only stepped out to split firewood. "It won't bother us again," he said. When she saw the faint smear of blood on his sleeve, she rushed forward. "You're hurt!" "It's not mine." He wiped his arm on the snow, unconcerned. "Let's move." But she didn't move. "You could have died." He met her eyes, and for the first time, something flickered there, softer than indifference. "So could you 3 nights ago, if I'd walked past." She couldn't find an answer to that. She only followed. By twilight, they reached a narrow ledge that opened to a small valley. There, smoke curled faintly above a cabin nestled among dark firs. Lonely, solid, waiting. "That's home," Isaiah said. Clara stared. It was both beautiful and terrifying. A place cut off from the world, surrounded by silence so deep it could swallow her whole. When they reached the door, Isaiah dismounted first, then lifted her down. His hands were warm even through the gloves, strong but careful. Inside, The cabin was dark. He struck a match, lit a lamp, and firelight flooded the single room. Rough-hewn beams, a stone hearth, shelves filled with tools and jars. It was sparse, but clean. "Sit by the fire," he said, removing his gloves. "You're half frozen." She did, holding her hands close to the flames until the feeling returned, a mix of pain and relief. Isaiah hung his rifle, poured water into a kettle, and spoke without turning. "You can stay as long as you work. There's food, a roof, and safety here. That's more than Winter Haven would have given you." Clara hesitated. "And the rest? The condition you mentioned?" Isaiah turned to her then, his expression unreadable. "I meant what I said. I need a wife. I need a child. The mountains don't care if a man dies alone, but I do. I'm done watching everything I build vanish with the thaw." Clara's breath caught. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said simply. "You've got strength under all that hurt. You didn't break, even when they threw you out. That's the kind of woman who survives up here." She looked away, tears burning. "You make it sound like a duty." "It's survival," he replied quietly. "Love might come later, or it might not, but I won't force it. I'm giving you a choice most men wouldn't." Clara turned toward the fire, her heart twisting. "And if I refuse?" "Then I'll take you down to the next valley come spring. You'll be free. But until then, you stay here, safe, warm, alive." The room fell silent except for the crackle of flames. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared into the fire, seeing every cruelty she'd endured in Winter Haven, every insult, every door slammed. She thought of her husband, of the child they'd never had. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "I'll stay." Isaiah nodded once. "Then we understand each other." He handed her a blanket, then stepped away, leaving her to the warmth and the choice she had just sealed with her breath. Outside, the wind howled through the pines, the mountain's way of welcoming another soul into its silence. The first night passed in silence, broken only by the crackle of fire and the low moan of wind pressing against the walls. Clara lay awake beneath the heavy quilt Isaiah had given her, listening to his slow, even breathing from the chair near the hearth. He hadn't tried to touch her, hadn't even looked at her after she'd said yes. He'd simply stoked the fire, said "good night," and sat down to sleep upright like a man used to guarding what was his. When morning came, the world outside was buried in snow. Isaiah was already awake, splitting kindling with steady rhythmic strikes. He handed her a tin cup of coffee when she rose. "Drink that first," he said. "Then we'll work out what you can manage." She sipped carefully, the bitter taste grounding her. "What kind of work?" He shrugged. "Keep the fire going clean. There's bread to bake, a roof to check before it caves. The mountain doesn't care you're new to it. It still expects you to pull your weight." Clara nodded. "I'll do my best." "I know," he said quietly, and there was no judgment in it. By midday, the cabin began to feel less like a stranger's shelter and more like a place with breath. Clara swept the floors, washed the tin plates, and hung a damp blanket by the fire to dry. She found a rhythm in the simple work, the kind that filled her hands and left her mind clear. Isaiah spent most of the day outside, chopping wood or checking traps. When he returned, snow dusted his beard, and his hands were raw from cold. Clara met him at the door with a bowl of stew she'd managed from salted meat and dried herbs. He sat, tasting it slowly. "You can cook?" "I used to," she said softly. Before. Before they forgot what kindness meant? She looked down, startled by how precisely he'd read her. Yes. He nodded, eating without another word, and for a long while the only sound was the spoon scraping against the tin bowl. When he finished, he pushed it aside and said, "You did good." The words were plain, almost rough, but they warmed her more than the fire. Days slipped into weeks. The storm sealed them in for most of January. Isaiah taught her how to mend a snare, how to feed the fire so the smoke didn't choke the room, how to melt snow for drinking water. She learned quickly, eager to prove she could belong. Sometimes in the evenings he would sit near the fire and whittle a piece of wood into shapes, small animals, birds, a cradle toy half finished. Clara noticed, but never asked, who it was meant for. When she sang softly to herself one night while sewing a tear in her skirt, he looked up, surprised. "That's an Irish tune." "My mother taught it to me," she said, embarrassed. "She used to hum it when she baked." "It's a good sound," Isaiah said. "Haven't heard anything that gentle in this place for years." Clara's heart clenched. "You lived here with your wife?" He hesitated. "I did." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," he said. "The mountain takes what it wants. You just learn not to hate it." The longer they shared the small space, the more their silences changed shape. At first they were sharp, heavy with distance. Then they softened, comfortable, almost companionable. She began to anticipate his footsteps outside, the smell of pine and snow that followed him in, the deep rumble of his voice when he said her name. One afternoon, while sweeping near the hearth, she caught him watching her. His gaze wasn't cruel or possessive, only thoughtful, as if he were trying to memorize the sight of her alive and moving through his house. She blushed. "You're staring." He smiled faintly. "Haven't had anyone here to stare at in a long time." "Is that supposed to make me feel special?" she teased, half embarrassed. He shrugged. "Just honest." Their eyes held for a moment too long, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding neither was ready to name. By February, the days grew longer. Clara began tending a few seedlings on the windowsill, hopeful for spring. Isaiah repaired the roof and set new traps near the ridge. Life had taken on a rhythm of necessity and quiet trust. But one night, when the wind howled fierce and the chimney rattled, the past found its way back. Isaiah sat staring into the fire, jaw clenched, eyes distant. Clara approached quietly. "You look miles away." He didn't move. "I was thinking of Ruth." "Your wife." He nodded once. "She died trying to give me a son. I buried them both before sunrise. After that, I told myself I'd never let another woman close enough to die on my watch again." Her voice trembled. "Then why did you bring me here?" He met her eyes, the blue of his gaze dark with something raw. "Because when I saw you on that street, I realized I was still the kind of fool who can't walk away." Tears filled Clara's eyes before she could stop them. "You didn't bring me here to replace her, Isaiah." "No," he said softly, "but I might have brought you here to remember I'm still human." She reached out, hesitated, then laid her hand over his. "You don't have to punish yourself for surviving." His fingers closed around hers, rough and trembling. "And what if that's all I know how to do?" "Then I'll remind you," she whispered. From that night on, something shifted. Isaiah still rose before dawn and worked until dusk, but now When he returned, he found her waiting by the fire with food ready and eyes that met his without fear. He began to laugh again, quiet, startled laughs that sounded foreign at first. Clara found herself humming louder, daring to tease him. One evening, as they stood outside watching the northern light streak across the sky, Isaiah said, "You'll see the thaw soon. The earth will breathe again." She smiled. "And what happens then?" He turned to her, his face serious but soft. "Then the deal we made becomes real." Her breath caught. "You mean—" He nodded. "I meant every word I said, Clara, but I won't take what isn't freely given. When spring comes, if you still want this life, you'll carry my child, not because I demanded it, because you chose it." Clara looked up at him, her heart pounding in the frozen air. "And if I already have?" He blinked. "Have what?" "The choice," she said quietly, "and I've already made it." For the first time, the mountain man smiled, a real unguarded smile that reached his eyes. The snow began to melt in slow ribbons, dripping from the roof, uncovering the earth in dark patches. Winter loosened its grip, but peace rarely lasted long in the mountains. For weeks, Clara and Isaiah moved as if the world outside the cabin didn't exist. They worked side by side, hauling water, planting early vegetables, mending the fence. There was laughter now, the kind that came from surprise, from finding warmth where neither expected it. But sometimes, when the wind carried voices from the valley below, Isaiah would grow distant. He'd step outside, rifle in hand, scanning the horizon with that soldier's stillness she had learned to fear. One evening, Clara asked softly, "You hear them again, don't you?" He nodded. "Riders, down the ridge. Could be trappers. Could be worse." "Worse?" "Town folk," he said. "Men who think every woman owes them her obedience, and every man owes them silence." Clara's stomach turned. "From Winter Haven?" "Maybe," he said. "Maybe not. But there's talk down there. Rumors about me bringing home a widow, about debts your husband's family claim you still owe." Clara froze. "Debts?" He turned to her, voice low. "They're saying you took jewelry that wasn't yours, that the Ashfords want you brought back." "That's a lie!" she cried, tears springing to her eyes. "They took everything from me, my home, my name, even my husband's Bible. They left me with nothing." "I believe you," Isaiah said simply, "but lies don't need proof to burn a house down." He crossed to the door and bolted it. "If they come, I'll handle it." "Handle it?" she whispered. "Isaiah, I don't want blood spilled because of me." He looked at her, that quiet, immovable strength in his eyes. "You think there wasn't already blood on their hands when they threw you out? The world's been spilling yours a long time, Clara. It's about time someone bled for you." She couldn't speak. She only reached for him, resting her forehead against his chest. He held her, his voice rough. "You stay inside if I tell you to. You hear me?" She nodded, tears soaking into his shirt. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire, staring at the flickering shadows, thinking of how easily her past had followed her up the mountain. The thought of being dragged back to Winter Haven filled her with terror. But deeper still was the fear of losing Isaiah, the man who had pulled her from the snow and taught her to live again. She rose quietly, found the ledger Isaiah kept on a shelf, and began to write. Names, places, everything she remembered about her husband's family and their lies. If anything happened, someone would know the truth. At dawn, Isaiah returned from checking traps, his coat heavy with frost. "You're awake early." I couldn't sleep," she said. I I heard something last night." He frowned. "Where?" "By the river. Horses." He didn't answer. He just loaded his rifle and stepped outside. 2 days later, the riders came. 5 men on horseback, their coats trimmed in fur, rifles slung across their saddles. Clara recognized the one in front instantly, Sheriff Dunn, the same man who had stood by as her mother-in-law cast her into the snow. "Mornin', Stonewall," the sheriff called as they approached. "Heard you've been harboring a thief." Isaiah stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "You got proof of that, Dunn?" Dunn spat into the snow. "Got the Ashford's word, and that's all the proof I need. You're going to hand her over, or I'll take her myself." Clara stood just inside the doorway, clutching the frame. Her heart pounded. Isaiah's voice was calm, but cold. "You step 1 foot closer to this cabin, you'll leave less of a man than you came." Dunn smirked. "You can't hide her forever. She's wanted back in Winter Haven for theft, debt, and deceit. That woman don't belong up here with you." Isaiah took 1 step forward. "She belongs where she's safe. That's here." The sheriff's smile faded. "You think you can stand against the law?" Isaiah's voice dropped. "I've stood against worse than law." The men shifted uneasily. Dunn hesitated, sensing the mountain man's resolve and the cold precision in his eyes that spoke of a soldier's past. Finally, Dunn spat again and turned his horse. "You can keep her for now, but when spring fully comes, I'll be back with papers." Isaiah didn't move until the sound of hooves vanished into the forest. Then he exhaled slowly and lowered the rifle. Clara ran to him. "You shouldn't have done that. They'll come again." "I know," he said quietly, "and I'll be ready." She clung to him, shaking. "They'll never stop, will they?" He looked down at her, his jaw tight, but his gaze soft. "Maybe not, but neither will I." That night, after the door was barred and the world outside turned black, Isaiah sat beside the fire, staring at the flames. "You asked me once why I brought you here," he said finally. "The truth is, I told myself it was for help, for a home, for a child. But it wasn't." Clara turned toward him. "Then why?" He met her eyes. "Because when I saw you in the snow, I remembered the man I used to be, the one who would have fought the whole world to keep his wife alive. I thought that man was dead." Her voice trembled. "He isn't." Isaiah leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers. "No, but if I lose you, he will be." The firelight flickered between them, catching the tears on her lashes and the rough line of his jaw. The mountain outside groaned with the wind, but inside the cabin 2 hearts beat steady against the storm. The mountain thawed early that year, and with it came danger. Streams swelled with meltwater, and the forest woke, shaking off its snow. But so did Winter Haven's greed. 3 weeks after the sheriff's warning, smoke appeared in the distance. 5 riders again, this time armed and determined. Clara spotted them first from the ridge while hanging linens to dry. Her heart dropped. "Ike!" she cried, running back toward the cabin. Isaiah was already outside, rifle in hand, jaw set like stone. "Get inside. Bar the door. Stay down." She hesitated. "You can't face them alone." He met her eyes, calm but fierce. "This is my land, Clara. I'll face whoever crosses it." Clara wanted to argue, but one look at him told her there was no use. His strength wasn't bravado. It was the quiet certainty of a man who'd already decided he would die before surrendering what he loved. She closed the door, bolted it, and knelt beside the window, watching through a sliver of glass as the riders approached. Sheriff Dunn dismounted first, boots sinking into the thawing mud. Behind him were two Ashford men and a pair of bounty hunters with cruel eyes and calloused hands. "Isaiah Stonewall," Dunn called out, his voice echoing in the valley. "By the authority of Winter Haven, you're harboring stolen property and aiding a fugitive widow who's been tried in absentia." Isaiah stepped off the porch, his rifle steady. "Funny, I didn't know Winter Haven had authority on my mountain." Dunn smirked. "We do now. You hand her over, and maybe we won't burn that cabin down with you in it." Isaiah's voice was calm, almost too calm. "You ride one step closer, and none of you will make it back down alive." One of the bounty hunters laughed. "You really think you can stop all of us, old man?" Isaiah tilted his head slightly. "You really want to find out?" There was a pause, cold and tense, like the breath before a storm. Dunn spat. "Enough talk. Get him!" The first gunshot cracked the still air. Isaiah moved before the echo faded, rolling behind a woodpile, firing once, twice. The nearest bounty hunter fell hard, a dark bloom spreading in the snow. The others ducked, returning fire. Bullets tore through bark and shattered glass. Clara screamed, ducking behind the hearth. "Ike!" she cried. "Stay down!" he shouted back. Another shot rang out, then another. Dunn cursed as his hat flew off, a bullet grazing his ear. "You'll hang for this, Stonewall!" Isaiah reloaded, his movements quick and practiced. "You'll have to live long enough to try." The remaining Ashford man charged toward the cabin, revolver raised. But before he reached the porch, Clara burst from the door, wielding Isaiah's hunting knife. "Stop!" she cried. "Leave him alone!" The man turned, startled, and Isaiah's shot struck him square in the chest. He fell without a sound. Isaiah grabbed Clara, pulling her back inside, furious and terrified all at once. "What were you thinking?" "I couldn't just hide while they killed you," she sobbed. His anger melted at the sight of her trembling. He cupped her face in his hands. "You listen to me. You're worth dying for, but not like this. You understand?" She nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. Outside, Dunn cursed and mounted his horse. "This ain't over, Stonewall. You can't hide her forever." Isaiah fired one last shot at Dunn's saddle, forcing him to drop low and gallop away with the last survivor. Then silence, heavy, ringing silence. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low. Isaiah leaned against the doorframe, blood seeping from a graze along his arm. Clara ran to him. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he said, voice hoarse. "Just a scratch." She tore a strip from her apron, pressing it to the wound. "You could have been killed." He caught her wrist gently. "So could you, and I'd have never forgiven myself." Her tears came again, soft and shaking. "Why do you always stand between me and the world, Isaiah?" He met her gaze, his expression raw. "Because the world's already taken enough from me. It's not taking you, too." She touched his cheek, her thumb tracing the rough edge of his beard. "Then stop fighting it alone." He looked at her for a long moment, then pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "You're my fight now, Clara, and my reason to live through it." Days later, the snow melted fully. The bodies were buried deep in the forest, the ground marked only by stones. No one came from Winter Haven again. Word spread that the sheriff had resigned and the Ashfords had left town quietly, unwilling to test the mountain again. For Isaiah and Clara, peace returned slowly, like a shy animal creeping from the woods after a storm. He healed. She smiled again. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge, Clara stood in the doorway, watching the world glow gold. Isaiah came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "It's over now," he said softly. She turned in his arms. "No, it's just beginning." Spring arrived quietly in the high country. The snow that once trapped them now melted into silver rivers, the forest bursting alive with the scent of pine and wet earth. For the first time since she'd set foot on the mountain, Clara woke to birdsong instead of wind. Isaiah was already outside, mending the fence. She stood at the doorway, hand resting on her small belly, a secret she hadn't yet spoken aloud. She watched him move, slow, deliberate, steady, and felt a warmth deeper than any fire could give. When he saw her watching, he smiled faintly. "You're up early?" "I couldn't sleep," she said. "The baby wouldn't let me." He froze, hammer in hand. Slowly, he turned. "The baby?" Clara's eyes softened. "It seems your mountain got its wish," she whispered. "By spring, I'll be carrying your child." For a long moment, Isaiah said nothing. Then he crossed the yard in 3 long strides and gathered her into his arms. He didn't speak, just held her, forehead pressed against hers, his breath shaking with something too big for words. When he finally found his voice, it came low and reverent. "You've given me back everything I thought I'd buried, Clara. A home, a family, hope." She smiled through tears. "You gave me life first. I'm only giving it back." They spent that morning side by side, Isaiah chopping wood while Clara tended the little garden behind the cabin. The world seemed to move slower, as if time itself respected their peace. Sometimes she'd stop and listen to the distant rush of the thawing river, the whisper of wind through the trees, and the soft rhythm of his work nearby. It all sounded like belonging. At midday, he came to her with a small box carved from birchwood. "Ruth's ring," he said quietly. "I kept it buried for years. Thought I didn't deserve to see it again, but I was wrong." He opened it. Inside lay a simple gold band, worn smooth by time. "I don't have a preacher," he said, voice rough, "and I don't have fancy words. But I've got this mountain, this home, and you. That's all I'll ever need. Will you wear it?" Tears glistened in Clara's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if the mountain itself had been waiting for that moment. That night they sat together on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, as the last light faded. The valley stretched below them, endless and alive. Isaiah's hand rested gently over her stomach. "You're safe here," he murmured, "both of you." Clara leaned against him. "And you?" He smiled. "I stopped running from ghosts the day you walked into my life. I think I'm finally home." They sat like that until the stars came out, 2 figures outlined by firelight and forgiveness, surrounded by a world that had once tried to break them. The wind swept through the pines, carrying the faint sound of laughter from the valley far below. Life would go on, harsh, uncertain, beautiful. But up here, in their small wooden world, peace had finally found a place to rest. The last snow melted that week. Isaiah marked the day by planting a small wooden cross at the edge of the clearing, one for Ruth, one for the child she never saw, and a third beside them for the past he was finally ready to let go. Clara stood with him, her hand in his. "Do you think they can see us?" she asked softly. Isaiah looked toward the horizon. If they can, I hope they see we made it. She smiled, eyes glistening. We did. He turned to her then, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. Whatever happens, you'll never be alone again, Clara. Not while I draw breath. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat beneath. I know. Above them, the mountain wind rose, gentle this time, almost tender, like a blessing carried down from heaven. And for the first time, neither of them feared what tomorrow might bring. Every story born in the mountains begins with loss and ends with something that refuses to die. Clara's began in the snow, on her knees before a locked door. Isaiah's began in silence, in a cabin that had forgotten laughter. But somehow, through frost and fear, they found their way to each other. Love didn't come to them like fire. It came like warmth, seeping into frozen hands. Slow, steady, undeniable. And in that quiet thaw, they proved that even two broken souls could build a life stronger than the storms that shaped them. If you're listening to this somewhere far away, maybe in a city that's forgotten the sound of wind in the pines, maybe in a place where your heart still aches from what you've lost, let this be your reminder. You are never too late to be found. You are never too much to be loved. And sometimes the home you're searching for is built, not discovered. Plank by plank, breath by breath, beside someone who refuses to let you freeze again. Now tell me, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And if you still believe that love can bloom even in the coldest places, don't go anywhere. The next story of another mountain, another broken heart, and another impossible love begins soon.